like to have a little question and answer at the end, but I will request that everybody hold their question and answers, and I'll be happy to facilitate that at the end of the session. So excited to see everyone's names and faces popped up. We are pleased to offer this workshop as part of the College of Arts and Sciences Be Well platform. The goal of Be Well is to support a culture of care for the College of Arts and Sciences and the CU community. You'll note that we've got a website link there. Our Be Well themes and resources are located on our website, and we encourage you to take a look. The Let's CU Well initiative is designed to support well-being for our communities by highlighting College of Arts and Sciences wellness research and application in an inclusive and innovative format. The December Be Well theme is Winter Solstice, and today we are pleased to welcome our two Let's CU Well experts of the month as they share their research and applied work related to this month's theme. First, we have Professor Aaron Ellingson from Astrophysical and Planetary Sciences. Her research interests include observational cosmology, galaxy evolution, and active galactic nuclei. Along with Dr. Ellison, we have Roselinde Kaiser, an assistant professor of psychology and neuroscience. Dr. Kaiser's work with the research on affective disorders and development, or the RAD laboratory, seeks to understand neurocognitive dysfunction in depression, including abnormalities in the structure, molecular signaling, and coordinated activity of brain networks involved in cognitive regulation and learning. Say that fast 10 times, right? We've learned a little bit about our presenters. I want to take a moment to learn a little bit about all of our guests and provide an opportunity to introduce ourselves. So at this point, I bet all of us are pretty familiar with the chat function. So if you would pull up your chat, this is a great opportunity to do a little community building. So in the chat, just pop in your name, and are you a student, employee, or community member, and which department do you represent? So let's take this opportunity to get to know each other and build community. All right, Renee, thanks for kicking us off. Sharon, welcome. Hi, Nick. Cool, students, awesome. Employee relations. Mackenzie's in SLHS. There's Michelle. Thanks, Angie. Welcome, John, Penny, Bernadette. Yes, everybody. Oh, this is so great to see. There's Angie and Megan. Jackie, welcome. Asian Languages and Civilizations. Katie Clark is here. Lily, hi, Lily. Welcome to all of our folks. I love taking just a moment to do this, to see that we can continue to build community even in these virtual mediums. So wonderful to have all of you. So as these are rolling in, I'm going to take a moment and just say we're so thrilled to have you. We've got an hour together, and I'm thrilled to introduce the December Let's CU Well experts of the month. And Dr. Ellingson will kick us off. I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So happy to see so many familiar names in the audience, and it's really a pleasure to come talk to you a little bit about what's going on in the sky right now. So it's getting dark. Have you noticed this? If you have, you're really not alone. It's a little bit darker when you get up in the morning. Maybe your commute is a little bit dimmer. It's a little bit dark in the afternoon. Again, going home, maybe it's already dark out. The sun doesn't seem as strong. Everything seems a little bit dimmer, a little bit darker. On a normal year, it would also be getting a little bit colder. And so what I like to do is tell you a little bit about the astronomy behind why we're seeing this change in the amount of light we're getting, the quality of light that we're getting, and then talk a little bit about how people around the world have reacted to this change of light, some of the ways in which people have coped with it, interpreted it, and sort of changed their culture, changed their lives in response to this change in light. So let's see the next slide, please. Thank you, Aaron. So the solar year, this is simply the 365 days that it takes for the Earth to go around the sun. And here's a nice schematic showing the Earth in 4 different positions in that journey around the sun. Now, The Earth's axis, our rotational axis, is tilted 23.5 degrees away from the orbital axis of the Earth. And so you can think of the Earth going around in this tilt. In half the year, the northern part of the Earth tilts away from the sun, and the southern part tilts towards the sun. So look at that first diagram at the very top. You can see that the sun is sending its most direct rays to the southern hemisphere. We in the north are tilted away. This would be in its most extreme position. We call it the solstice or the December or winter solstice for the north. But remember, that actually means that in the south, that they're having high summer as well. So we have this familiar flip of the seasons. But I'm going to be talking primarily about the north. That's where we live right now. It's a little bit more relevant. As we go around through the rest of the solar year, we have a position where north and south are equally illuminated. And then in June, on the third, back again, please. In June, on the third one down, you can see now the northern hemisphere is tilted towards the sun. We're getting more direct light from the sun. And so this is the reason for the seasons, this directness of the light coming to us from the sun, hitting us at a more direct angle. That really is the reason why we have these warm and cold cycles in various parts of the Earth, flipped from northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere. Okay, next slide, please. But what does it really look like for someone who's standing here on the Earth? And this diagram shows a person who is in the northern hemisphere, and they are facing south. So imagine yourself also facing south, so that east is the sunrise, west is the sunset. This person can trace the position of the sun as it rises, culminates at noon, and then sets on 3 particular dates of the year. So in the middle, let's look at the middle line. This is for the equinoxes, equal day, night, and this is when the sun rises exactly east. It goes up, it doesn't go all the way through the zenith, the top part of the Earth. It goes up, and from our latitude, certainly it rises about 50 degrees above the horizon, and then sets directly due west. And that's the midpoint of the year. But the extremes, for the winter and the summer, you see a very different pattern of the path of the sun. If we look now to the path that's behind the person, what you'll see is that in the summer solstice, this would be the date of June 21st in our calendar, you see that the sun actually rises really far north. It rises, it goes up really much higher in the sky. That's why it's warm. That's why the sun feels so bright, and then comes and sets north. On the opposite side of the year, on December 21st, what you'll see is the opposite. The sun rises south, doesn't get very high, and sets to the southwest. Also look at the length of these arcs. In the summertime, the sun is up in the sky for a really long time. We have long days. In the equinox, exactly 12 hours, equiday, equinox. And then in the wintertime, the sun is up only for a relatively short time. And so this is the sort of pattern that people have been watching over the entire history of humanity, watching the sun and feeling the effects of the sun on our everyday lives. Next slide, please. So I want to take a look at what would happen. Don't play this yet. I wanted to show you what would happen if you, as a sun observer, someone who is deeply in touch with the sun, as many ancient people have been before we started having electric lights, staying inside, having our little screens to look at instead of the entire sky. Imagine that you are a sun observer and you get up at dawn every single day and you look to see where the sun is rising on the horizon. It turns out this gives you a much better idea of where the sun is in its cycle. In fact, you can build a calendar, or the idea of a calendar, based on watching where the sun rises on that eastern horizon. So the picture you see here is actually a panorama from one of my favorite places in Colorado. It's Chimney Rock National Monument, which is a different story I'd love to tell you another time. And what we're going to see is where the sun rises. If you do a little movie saying one day to the next day, to the next day, to the next day, watching the cycle from spring to summer to winter and back. So imagine again, you are a designated sun watcher and you're recording this in your mind, possibly in pictures, taking note of where the sun is going to be because, well, your lives may depend on it. Where you plant, planting the crops, harvesting the crops, or even following the herds, you need to know when are the seasons, you need to know where the sun is. So let's run this movie and see what it looks like. So the movie starts with the sun moving north. Okay, that means spring going into summer. Oh, it goes right behind the rocks. But solstice means sun stands still. The sun stands still on June 21st, and then it swings quickly through the equinoxes and heads south. The days are getting shorter, it's getting colder, getting nastier. If you're lucky, every year the sun is going to stop, solstice, and come back. So if you can imagine how you might react to this, watching the sun, needing to know the sun, watching this yearly cycle, year after year, really the sense of this, really a cosmic cycle. Imagine going into winter solstice. Imagine those last days, watching the sun day by day, darker by darker. You hope it will stop. Because if the sun doesn't stop, if you don't have the solstice, if you don't have that day where things turn around, what if the sun just kept going south, disappeared off the end of the earth, plunging us into darkness? So the winter solstice is a time that is in some ways very fraught for people in the Northern Hemisphere. We hope that the sun will do what we think it's going to do, and people have marked and have perhaps hoped and have really paid attention to that pattern for thousands of years. Right, the next slide, please. So here are some pictures showing some places where people have marked this pattern of the sun going from north to south, this grand swing along the horizon. In the upper right is a site in Peru. It's called Chanquillo, and this is a pre-Incan site, so it's really quite old. And if you stand in a place that is designated by sort of a fortress-like structure and look out, there are these series of towers on a ridge. If you stand in the designated spot, what you'll see is that the sun will rise behind the towers in that sweep across the year from solstice to solstice. So the possibility is that this is a place where people did keep track of how the sun was going, particularly when it reached one end or the other end for the solstices. If you drop down to the one right underneath it, this is a crack of light. This is a site in Ireland. It's prehistoric, it's Neolithic, it's probably about 4,000 or 5,000 years old, where there's a big dark barrow, a dark place where people were buried. There's a small opening, and only on days near the winter solstice will the sun shine through that opening, sending a finger of light directly through the darkness to touch the back of the tomb. Dramatic and very specific to one time of year. In the middle bottom, this is a solstice calendar, sort of like the one I just showed you, but this one is actually a solstice calendar that's still in use by the Hopi of First Mesa. You can see an outline of the mountains. I believe these are the San Francisco Mountains in Arizona. And you can see the dates where the sun will, in this case, set against those mountains. This type of calendar is actually used and is still used to set the dates of a winter solstice ceremony, Soyal, that is celebrated by the people of First Mesa. On the left, Chaco Canyon, another place where a light shines through a crack between two rocks to make a dagger that appears only on the solstice, in this case, actually the summer solstice. Again, a dramatic moment that people celebrate, saying this is a special day. Going up, the Egyptian temples at Karnak. So winter solstice, the entire temple is built to capture the light on that day. And then in the upper middle, this is a marvelous thing. Most of the people who really watch carefully on these seasons are people who live in the reasonably far north or the reasonably far south. Okay, this is when the swing, when the seasons are most intense, but even in the tropics, where the sun may not change its position on the horizon, in the tropics, there are, by definition, it turns out, at least 1 or 2 days per year where the sun will go directly through the zenith. And here is a place, this is an underground cavern in Xochicalco, which is in Mexico. This was built 1,000 years ago in Mayan times. And on those specific days, days of real religious significance, the sun shines in a pillar down through that hole, down into the center of the earth, down in underneath the earth. So the sun, watching the cycles of the sun, this is something that people have been fascinated by, and not only for practical purposes, but also for religious purposes, for mystical purposes, for pretty much the entire history of mankind. We have always watched the sun. Go ahead, the next slide, please. Probably the most famous of these solar calendars from prehistoric times is Stonehenge. And so this is a set of grand, huge, megalithic stones that are still mostly standing in southwestern England. Stonehenge dates from 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. And so we're looking at really, really deep ancient history here. You can see a picture there of Stonehenge as it looks today, and just underneath it, a model of one of the phases of Stonehenge, showing what the suite of stones would look like. I want to point your eyes towards an axis that you might see. Do you see the really big stones in the center? There are 5 we call trilithons pointing off in a direction. Then you see 3 stones, and in the very far back, you can see a single stone standing there. They may have originally have been 2, but you can see there's an axis or something that sort of says, even though it's a circle, even though it might be something like a horizon or a sky, there's a place you want to look. There's a place, a special place. If you look at the earthworks around Stonehenge, which actually even predate the stones, you can see in the middle slide that there is an avenue that goes along that axis that goes out for actually a couple miles out from Stonehenge and eventually leads down to the river. It's basically looks like a processional avenue of some sort. Again, in this place near Stonehenge, marking this very, very important axis. Now, you may know that if you do stand on that axis and look through those stones on the summer solstice, you will see the sun rising just above that distant stone right on the edge of the model. It's called the heel stone. And the right-hand picture is a picture that my daughter took when we were there at Stonehenge on the summer solstice in 2019. It's a beautiful thing. Thousands of people come. It's really quite the experience. I recommend that if you find yourself at Stonehenge at either solstice, to take a visit, because people have been celebrating the sun there for thousands of years. But there's a question about the summer solstice idea with Stonehenge, because when we start looking at the archaeological record, what we find is that definitely there were things going on at Stonehenge. It was a place where there were burials. Okay, it was a place where people did not feast there. There are no actual parties at Stonehenge then as there are now. And in fact, when you look at the area surrounding it, you do see remnants of places where there is a lot of feasting, a lot of people slaughtering pigs. The pigs are 9-month-old. Okay, they're not baby new pigs or year-old pigs. They're pigs that are about 9 months old. And so this starts to point towards this idea that maybe Stonehenge was a place that was used not in the summer solstice, but in the winter solstice. Stepping out to a bigger picture of the Stonehenge area gives you actually a wider appreciation for how this entire area in England might have been a significant place for reenacting the cycle of light to dark and then light again. The places where the feasting was done is a place located quite a ways away from Stonehenge, but is linked by this avenue. And so if you show the next slide, it could be that the phenomenon that people celebrated at solstice was not the sun rising over the heel stone, but something like this, of a procession going down the avenue and seeing in winter the sunset going behind the stones. So Stonehenge is a place of darkness, of a place that is associated with the darkening of the season rather than the ascendancy of the light. This is actually more likely what people were thinking when they built this tremendous structure 5,000 years ago. So let me stop there with a vision of the darkness coming upon us on December 21st, but the idea that this is the day where the sun stops, and perhaps the idea that maybe it will be coming back to us. So off to Rosie.
Rosie, I'll go ahead and stop my share.
Great. And I will share my screen instead and pick right back up. on Erica's beautiful and really interesting and instructive piece. I have to say, Erica, now I'd really like to go to a party at Stonehenge. That's my new aspiration, I think. But as Erica pointed out and articulated beautifully, the science that underlies our experience of lightness and dark at winter solstice. And she also pointed to the reasons that this time of year is emotionally meaningful and even fraught for humans across the years. And also now in modern times, the winter solstice is an important time to be thinking about mental and physical wellness, because this is a time of year that can be a period of vulnerability for a lot of people. Oops, going too fast. I say that in part because this is a time of year that's a time of increased stress for humans across the centuries, as Erica pointed out, but also for all of us in on this conversation today. And one of the tricky parts about stress at this time of year is that it's elevated in lots of different areas of our lives. So, for example, we experience heightened physical stress at this time of year. And this is in the form of colder temperatures, as Erica pointed out, for folks in the Northern Hemisphere, except for this bonkers year that we're experiencing. But this is also in the form of what we would call circadian disruption. And circadian really means biological patterns that are happening in a 24-hour cycle. Circadian disruption is consequent to the changes in available sunlight that are related to planetary movement, as Erica highlighted, but also the abrupt shift in how light lines up with daily activities when we move from daylight savings to standard time. I'm still reeling from that one, and that was several weeks ago. And circadian disruption is a really important stressor for us. When our biological rhythms become irregular, this is associated with problems in appetite, in metabolic functioning. I'm still eating those mini Kit Kat bars for my kids' Halloween bags, but this can also lead to poorly regulated sleep. And sleep and metabolic functioning are some of the foundational building blocks of health. And I'll get back to that a little bit later on. This is also a time of heightened social stress at this time of year. Colder and darker days can lead to confinement and limit a lot of our social activities. And don't get me wrong, there are also a lot of social opportunities related to the holiday season in our culture. And many of those are deeply rewarding. But the flip side is that some of those same holiday events and traditions that are rewarding and that can foster social connections can also be highly stressful. Things like political, cultural, or personal conflicts can bubble up in these family gatherings and place strain on relationships and really tax our communication skills. And finally, this time of year happens to be a period of particularly heightened stress for all of us who live in the academic world, which we all do. Final exams are looming for students and for faculty. College and graduate applications are due, and the admission cycle is kicking into high gear at this time of year. We've got grading, end of semester projects, end of the year budget reports, and we're all trying to also prepare for the next semester. Everyone on campus is juggling some combination of these academic stressors while also juggling those physical and social stressors that we just reviewed. Now, you might be wondering, why is stress so important for wellness? Well, stress has really important effects on how our bodies and brains function, which means this affects actions, emotions, and how we think. So when you experience an intense stress, your body mounts a finely orchestrated biological stress response. And in this stress response, threat-sensitive regions of the brain, including the amygdala, don't worry, I won't go into too much detail here, but threat-sensitive parts of the brain here will signal through both direct and indirect pathways to glands in your brain and deeper down in your body to release a cascade of hormones. And these hormones race through your bloodstream to other organs and elicit effects on breathing, heart rate, immune system, memory, and other kinds of functions. So probably everyone here can think of a time that this happened. maybe a near miss when a bad driver sped through a red light in your intersection. If you remember what that felt like, heart beating fast, muscle tension, this is all part of this biological stress response. Now, over many years of evolution, humans have developed a keen ability to sense threat and to respond quickly. When you're being chased by a predator, it helps that your body's stress response diverts more blood to your muscles and increases your heart rate. This prepares you to either escape or to fight. But you might also be able to think of times that you experienced this biological stress response when there were really no life-threatening lions or tigers anywhere in sight. Modern stressors include things like family dinner or final exams. And those are stressors that you can't just escape or fight. And in those cases, it's not helpful to have a big biological stress response. These are the times that we want to be able to regulate our stress response, and in particular, to regulate the kinds of behaviors that we're choosing when we're under stress. We also want to be able to regulate stress when we have to navigate chronic stress. So stressors that unfold over days or weeks. And there's been plenty of research into chronic stress. And one of the reliable findings is that if your biological stress system is taxed over time, we'll see both persistently elevated stress hormones and decreased reactivity of the stress system. So in other words, your body's stress system is always on, but it's worse at reacting appropriately when new stressors happen. And that type of unregulated chronic stress in our body is intimately linked to mental health. We've known for years of clinical research that stress is one of the most reliable predictors of depression, anxiety, and issues with impulse control. But not all stressors are created equal. And the types of stress that are most strongly linked with health challenges are stress experiences that we fail to acknowledge, that we perceive as uncontrollable or too intense for coping. And those are the experiences of stress that overwhelm or persistently tax our biological stress system and ultimately detract from wellness. And so, given the heightened burden of stressors that we're all experiencing at this time of year, not to mention during a rather unpredictable pandemic with Omicron looming in the ether, it's crucial for us to build awareness of our own stress and how we're responding to it. Because stress can also be an opportunity for increased resilience, as I believe Erica is going to discuss in just a moment. And we can be intentional in taking the winter solstice as an opportunity for healthy transition too. So Erica, I'm going to continue driving for you. So just give me a heads up when you want me to proceed.
Great. Thank you, Rosie. So, Rosie's given us some idea that this is a time stressful for our bodies, for our societies, for all of us personally. And so what have people done around the time of solstice to maybe let off steam or to approach this dark time in a way that compensates a little bit for the lack of light and the stress it does put on us? The Roman roots of the European celebrations of the solstice actually go to the planet Saturn, the god Saturn. He is Father Time, and you can see him up there in the upper left with his sickle. Now, Father Time is not necessarily associated with exactly the mid-December celebrations that we associate with the solstice now, but we actually see him just a few days later. Do you guys know about the old guy with the sickle who shows up on New Year's Eve? And so he is the guy who sort of shows us time, shows us the passing of time into the new year. But in Roman times, his feast was also Saturnalia, which was a very large, very rambunctious feast that was held right around the time of the solstice, and it was associated with the solstice time. These feasts were like this Renaissance painting you see that were boisterous and rowdy, lots of drinking, lots of various types of behavior, really a letting off steam sort of event. Around that time, there are also celebrations of things like the Day of Fools or the Feast of Fools, where the elite and the serfs or the slaves would switch their roles back and forth. And so again, a way of letting off social pressure and social steam during these darkest nights. The religious iconography from that era also shows a lot of association with the sun. the coin in the center is a picture of Sol Invictus. Okay, this is the unconquered sun. This is the sun that's coming back. This is the solstice and a celebration of the sun returning. So the solstice now is going from not just a time of darkness now, but a celebration of the return of the light. On the right-hand side is a relief of the Roman soldier's god Mithras. Mithras has Persian roots, but he was extremely important to the soldiers of Rome right around the 400, 500 ADs. And this was a time of great change, of course, of all the Roman Empire and all that, and also the rise of Christianity. Mithras traditionally was born on the winter solstice, was associated with being a sun god. And if you look at some of the other things he's associated there, there is a bull and a dog and a snake. All of these are astrological constellations as well. And so he's very much a sky god associated with the sun, associated with the rebirth of the sun on the winter solstice. At the same time that Mithras was extremely popular with pagan Rome, this was also the time of the beginning of Christianity. And there is a possibility that the choice of a December birthday for Jesus was actually in some ways a folding in of the Mithras belief with the rising belief in Christianity. And so Mithras and Christmas also may have a link as well. The difference between 21st and 24th, this is the calendar has been recalibrated over and over again over millennia. And so that 4-day little shift from 21 on the astronomical solstice to 24 or 25 that we say would be Christmas, this is sort of in the bookkeeping of the Christian calendar. Can I see the next slide, please? Next one.
Erica. One moment.
Okay. So from here, we're going to fast forward into some of the images and some of the traditions that may be familiar with us here in North America and in Northern Europe for the most part too.
Sorry, Erica, your slides are frozen on my machine.
Oh, no, and I'm not seeing them at all.
Let me take over on mine. I'll give it a shot.
Oh, I got it back. Guys, it wouldn't be a Zoom call if there weren't at least some technical issues, okay?
You said it.
Are we all set?
Yep, that looks good to me. You can see some familiar things on this slide. The idea of the sun coming back is associated with life eternal, with the things that don't die or that come back from apparent death. And so what are the symbols of this? The evergreen tree, which might turn into our holiday Christmas trees. The plants in Northern Europe that never die, that stay green all through the wintertime, the holly, the ivy, and the mistletoe. All of these also get tied up along with sort of a celebration of light, of eternal life, of rebirth that in Northern Europe was called Yule. And so now we have the Yule and also the Yule log. We don't often do this, but the Yule log traditionally was an entire tree trunk, and it would burn, keep on shoving it into the fire, it would burn for many days. And that would be the entire feast of Christmas. That could last as much as a week, maybe as much as 12 days. You would continue to burn the Yule log, and when it was done, that would be the end of the Christmas feast. Right now, the remains of the Yule log is probably best seen in the bûche de Noël and the Yule log cake that is traditional in France and other countries. But there are other feasts associated with Christian saints, with Catholic saints around that same area. There's Santa Lucia, which is celebrated in the northern countries in Scandinavia by young women with crowns of candles who will come and bring food to their family early in the morning. So if I'm wondering if that might connect your eyes with that picture of Sol Invictus, with the rays of light coming out from his head. The Yule celebrations really take, though, not only this idea of brightness, of everlasting light, of light coming back, but it's also, there's still a dark thread in there. In the bottom right is a picture of, this is actually a Swedish tradition of a witch-like goat. Goats and deer and reindeer have varying roles in these celebrations of light at Christmas. Sometimes they're seen as bringing children gifts. And so you can imagine this as being sort of a reindeer light happy goat giving gifts to the children. On the other hand, he looks pretty like a kind of a dark character. And there are characters, there are entities in Northern European, which are people like the Krampus, who is sort of a devil-like horned creature, or you could think of them as the evil twin of Santa Claus. And so again, this lightness, darkness, this positive gift-giving light, but also an underlying of still acknowledging that darkness is still there, even in the traditions that we see today. In the center, of course, another celebration of light is Hanukkah. Hanukkah refers to an actual historical event. However, the timing of Hanukkah is celebrated on the Hebrew calendar. This is a lunar calendar, and so, or a lunar solar calendar. And the way that it is timed, the way the days that it is celebrated on actually determines that every year it will be held on the dark of the moon, on the nights right around the dark of the moon, the new moon, in the time of the longest nights of the year. And so you could think of Hanukkah as lighting up the darkest of the nights. And so we have, again, a lot of familiar ceremonies, which really go back maybe really all the way to the impetus of Stonehenge. This idea of this is a time of darkness, and yet now we are going to be celebrating the solstice, the sun come back, and the rebirth of light. Next slide, please. So we can look around our immediate environment and see the ways that we are celebrating this, and the way we can, kind of tap in to just things going on around us here in Boulder and in Colorado. We all love the star. I love the star that shines sometime around the Thanksgiving holiday and stays shining up in the mountains to remind us again of light in the darkness. The Christmas lights everywhere, the holiday lights that show up on the Pearl Street Mall and all over town, again, lighting up the darkness over and over. Denver is actually famous for having the very first electric display of holiday lights. And so this happened in the early, sort of in the 19-teens. And the picture there is a picture of the first public Christmas tree lit up by electric lights from 1920. And so not only do we have this beautiful tradition we're doing now, we were the first to do it. In the upper right-hand corner, I told you that in 2019, my daughter and I went to Stonehenge and we saw the solstice there. And it was really moving, certainly to me, because I study this stuff, but also to share it with my daughter. And we always have a large baking and sweets cooking extravaganza over the holidays. And so that year we made fudgehenge. And so you can see there a archaeologically correct version of fudgehenge that we made to celebrate the other half of the year. After the true stones, now we have the stones that we celebrated and then we ate them. If you are on campus on the solstice itself, I don't know if you've ever noticed the sculpture down by the CU Art Museum. It's in that little corridor. You'll see there's a pole there with a donut, with a plate with a circle on it, and then a chain with circles hanging on it, and then some bricks in different patterns on the ground. If you go there at noon on December 20, 21st, 22nd, remember the sun stands still, so a couple of days, you get very similar effects. What you'll see is that the shadow of the sun, of that donut, falls directly into the center of the red brick circle. This was intentional. This is part of the art installation to serve as a solar calendar for the Boulder campus as well. So whether we see it and acknowledge it, yes, the lights, the traditions that we have, both within our families, within our communities, but also some things you may not have noticed, we are keeping those traditions of holding on to the idea that it is a time of darkness, but it really is a time where we regather, we come together, and we celebrate the light as well. So I'll send it back to Rosie. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. And I'm going to have to venture over to the art museum. I'll be on campus. So I'm really curious to check that out now and get a picture myself. So Erica has highlighted so many of the ways that the winter solstice can be a time of celebration, transition, and renewal. And I spoke earlier about how this can be a period of heightened stress. So you might be wondering, how do we balance these pieces? So how do we avoid or sort of not get bogged down in the stress that's going to be happening at this time of year? And how can we use this period for celebration or to build on Erica's ideas? And I will say, one of the things that I talk about with clients or with students is that the first step in coping with stress is to build awareness of stress as it's happening. And that's something that a lot of us don't do. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to ask everyone here to either take out a piece of paper and play along with me, humor me here, or you can do it in your head. And I'll probably call on Aaron and Erica and maybe Teresa too, because y'all have been in this with us since the inception of this exercise. But the first thing I want folks to ponder on a little bit is just, how do you know when you're stressed? What are your personal signs of stress? This could be thoughts or actions or physical experiences or feedback from other people. So I want you to take just a moment to think about that. And I can tell you a couple examples for me. One of mine is my sleep goes wacky, right? So I find it much harder to fall asleep. And I will find I have a lot of tension, like I carry around a lot of tension in the muscles in my shoulders. So for me, those are a couple personal signs of stress, but those might not be yours. So think about, what are your hallmarks, your red flags? So I'll give you a minute there, and then I'm going to ask for a share out in a minute. But the next question, or the complementary question then, once you've identified a couple of your red flags, your stress flags, I guess, what makes you stressed? So, think about what tends to happen, what events, thoughts, or experiences tend to happen right before you notice some of those signs of stress. So what are the things happening in your life? So I'm going to give you a moment just to sit on that. So while folks continue to brainstorm, I'm going to go ahead and ask those who are ready to either chime in the chat or just jump in verbally. A sign of stress, one or two signs of stress, and then what are the stress triggers that you notice? So Erica, do you have any for me?
Certainly the sleep thing. The other thing is that I will get an idea in my head and I will just go around and around and around and around and around, usually a negative thing, and I'll just obsess over it and not be able to let it go. And my husband talks about his vision of me riding my little tricycle in a circle over and over and over and over and over and over. So when I realize I'm doing that, I know there's something external I have to look at.
I call it washing machine mind, but I like the tricycle analogy. And Erica, what happens before that? Or what do you notice? What are some of the triggers that get you to that spot the most reliably?
I was thinking very often it's a problem where either I feel like someone is not understanding me or critical of me, or sometimes it's a problem where I feel like I need help.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't help. And I become, not only very distressed by this, but also, why aren't people helping me? And so there is an aspect of, real, I'm isolated from other people who might be able to help.
Yeah, those are such great examples. And I really resonate with those examples too. I'm seeing some really good ones in the chat too. I just want to call some of these out. So Erin noticing that her sleep quality also tends to degrade, tightness in the throat, and being snappy with other people. And Heather said something similar, losing your temper, right? So being more irritable, being more impatient. Meredith talks about that as well. So folks noticing certain behaviors that might happen. So like interpersonal behaviors, things like differences in how we eat or what we eat, things like physical experiences like your stomach hurting, shallow breath, Teresa, absolutely. And noticing things like cognitive changes. So that washing machine mind, I think we all have at least experienced it once. Some of us have probably experienced it more than others, but also just this kind of sort of preoccupation with the problem and feeling kind of stuck. Ingrid has explained some of her triggers are social gatherings and small talk. So other people can be very stressful, especially when there are other people who might have certain expectations or who are not giving us what we need. Fear of getting an illness. This is a really normal fear to be experiencing right now. Yeah, and sort of how to compensate with that. And it seems like that's a few people. So, you know, if you've been kind of pondering on your own thoughts, it sounds like there's some consistency, and you might also have other ones. So stress is a universal experience. This is something that happens all the time and really for all of us. And one of the things that we've noticed, perhaps, as we list out these personal signs of stress, is we see a lot of physical symptoms. And remember, that goes back to what I mentioned before, that our bodies are really good at reacting to stress, but our bodies are really bad at figuring out which stressors we need to run away from or fight to the death, and which ones actually are going to be better solved by regulating our body's stress response and by choosing new behaviors or choosing sort of what's going to get us closer to our goals and values. So are there any lions or tigers on your list of triggers? You know, if not, if your triggers are more like my triggers, things like deadlines and finals and family or social events, those kinds of modern stressors that we can't really run away from, those are the times that we do want to choose, very intentionally choose the coping strategies that we use. And one of the gaps in choosing those coping strategies is that most of us walk around without really reflecting much on how stressed we really are. It's such a basic skill. You know, 5-year-olds are getting taught how to do this in kindergarten, but once we're adults, we just don't spend a lot of time reflecting on it. But it's a necessary first step. You're not going to be able to engage in intentional coping if we don't first cultivate awareness that we're experiencing stress in the first place. Now, what kind of coping can we use, right? You all probably have your own stress coping strategies, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of hear what other people are doing or to think about it in a different way. And stress coping can come in the form of a lot of different kinds of actions and thoughts. So for example, you might cope with stress by exercising, or by taking deep and steady breaths. These are what we would call physical coping strategies, and they can modify or calm down that biological stress response in the moment in really immediate ways. It's almost like magic, really, how we can intentionally calm down the body's stress response. Or we might cope with stress about an upcoming exam if you're a student by creating a study plan or writing up flashcards. Those are what we would call active problem solving coping strategies. And most of us use a range of different kinds of coping strategies for different problems. And some of the coping that I use, for example, is more or less useful in the long term. And that's probably true for all of us. So for example, if you cope with exam stress by pulling an all-nighter, counterintuitively, that tends to lead to poorer performance, because sleep deprivation actually impairs learning in the long term. Or coping strategies like drinking or buying things on Amazon. Those things can feel very good in the moment, but tend to not really help much with the sources of stress in the long term. So it's okay to have useful and non-useful coping strategies, or stuff that works better in the short or long term. But what I'd like you to do next is take just a minute to sort of inventory your coping strategies. So this table gives a few categories of coping that might help you in brainstorming your inventory, but it's also okay if you have other coping strategies that are not in the categories here. So what are your go-to coping strategies? That's the question before you. So I'll give you just a moment to think about that. So while folks are pondering about their own personal inventory, I'm being mindful of time. Otherwise, I would make everyone sit for a lot longer and generate a big old coping strategies list. But since we're mindful of time, I'll say one of my best and most accessible coping strategies, Erica, you might like this one, is just to be outside in the sun. And it's amazing how much I forget to do that, especially when we're on Zoom calls like this all day, every day. But that even just being outside for a few minutes, I've learned can be a really effective coping strategy for me. It's sort of like a refresh on stuff. It doesn't solve all my stressors, but it's something that can help. Oh, this is great. So Aaron's chiming in and says, roller skating outside. That is wonderful. I would fall flat on my face. I have no coordination, but this is a good example of how coping strategies that work well for one person might be out of reach for some of us. But listening to good music and dance or workout videos, that's great. Yes, I have dance parties with my 3-year-old, and those are also a good coping strategy. Other folks, what kinds of coping strategies are working? Exercise, that's a great one. Music, mindfulness of senses. I like that one a lot, Meredith. So taking that time to connect with the senses. Coloring books, I like that too. I think art is a really important coping strategy. That's also something I'm not good at, but I do it anyways. Books, oh, thank you. I'm always interested in recommendations. Being outside, cooking, cleaning. Renee, all right, you are welcome to come and stress cope in my house anytime you want, just so you know. Intentional stillness, I like that one a lot, Teresa. Guided meditations and seeing friends. Absolutely, Tina. So I think connecting with your social group can be a really good thing, and getting your nails done. Yes, I think that's a great one as well. So one of my favorite things about talking about coping is that I always get new ideas. So just so you know, you all are my guinea pigs because I'm just adding these coping strategies to my own personal list. But I appreciate that. Yeah. So building this inventory of coping strategies can be just really helpful. And I want to highlight a couple of the ones that we know from neuroscience, so brought to you from the brain, that tend to be some of the foundational building blocks for stress resilience as well. The first one, and this is one that my students tell me is absolutely impossible and out of reach, and at the same time is just so critical. It's just adequate and regular sleep. I know this feels impossible for people, but it's during particular sleep stages that our brain engages in really important cleanup. You can think of it like the janitors are getting out their mops and brooms while you're sleeping. And it's important for metabolic function in your brain. It's also important for learning and memory consolidation. So again, to the students who are on this call, if you study, that knowledge is actually more likely to stick around long-term if you sleep afterwards. So again, if you pull an all-nighter, that's neurobiologically, there are science-based reasons that that's just not going to stick around. A couple other really important building blocks that we all know about, but sometimes neglect to do, include things like activity and nutrition. These are important for survival of your body, right? But they also improve stress resilience in the body, and in some research, enhance neurogenesis, so the process by which new neurons are being added to key learning systems in the brain. And finally, this one may sound counterintuitive. Exposure to healthy stress is an important coping and resilience strategy. So often humans, along with every other living organism, if you have a dog, you see this, right? We try to avoid stress if you can. Stress is uncomfortable and challenging. And some forms of stress are associated with quite serious negative outcomes. And we've walked through what those are. But not all stress is bad. And in fact, humans seek out stressful experiences all the time, going on a difficult hike, or asking a potential romantic partner out on a first date. These are all examples of healthy stress. And healthy stress can be defined as stress experiences that you choose. So maybe if you choose to go to that holiday dinner, even if it might be rife with political controversy, you're choosing it. And that's going to allow you to exercise and build those healthy coping strategies. And healthy stress makes us more resilient. So we build up our ability to tolerate and solve new stress experiences in the future by coping with healthy stress. So think about it like strengthening those coping abilities like you'd strengthen a muscle, except instead of a muscle, it's forging those functional brain networks that are involved in modulating your stress response. And this time of year, this time of transition, we can take this opportunity to identify and intentionally pursue healthy stress and better coping. This will ultimately help us to be equipped to cope with all the other stress that we're not choosing. And we can use this time more concretely as an opportunity to identify the values that we want to move towards. So Erica spoke about this as a pivot point, a time of transition. And we can do that in a way in our own values lives by identifying the values that we want to move towards and create a plan for challenging ourselves to act on those values. It's not a coincidence that New Year's, which is also coming up soon, is a time in which we make resolutions. Well, New Year's resolutions kind of get a bad rap for being broken easily. But what I'd like us to close with here is an opportunity to couple value-centered goals, what you want to move towards in the new post-solstice year, with this reflection on how we can cope with stress effectively. So if you don't know what a value is, I have to say it's a loosey-goosey word, right? It can be defined in a lot of different ways. One approach is to just relax and brainstorm a word that describes how you want to behave now and on an ongoing basis. And some good questions to kick off this conversation include, what do you care about? What matters to you? What inspires you? And when do you feel that you're living life your way, doing what? And just as an added sort of spark to brainstorming, these are just a few examples of what we're talking about when we talk about values. This is not an exhaustive list. And keep in mind that values are not static. They're dynamic. The precise values that guide our goals and behaviors can shift over time. And also, I think this is important, keep in mind that not all values are going to be at the forefront of your awareness or actions at all times. You don't get extra points for moving towards all the values at once, right? In fact, it's usually impossible. But when we start identifying some of the values that are important to us, we can begin to adopt a more intentional approach to our goals and actions here in this post-solstice next step that we're all about to take. So maybe just take a moment to think about what are some of the values that are most important. All right, so while folks are thinking about that, and this is a big question, so it's okay if you're still ruminating on what those may be, but taking the values that you've identified that are important for you, the next step is to reflect on what are some of your goals for the new year. I'm saying post-solstice year is the new year, and how are they anchored by your values? So if you have a goal, if you're a student, or let's say you're me, and you have a goal of beginning your committee service assignment within 24 hours of being assigned it instead of procrastinating on it, right? This is anchored by my value of industry and persistence. So thinking about how goals relate to values. And I'm not going to ask people to share out this time because we're about at the end of our time, but I'll just leave you with these last couple of questions. What are the values that are anchoring you? What are the related goals? And then what are the main sources of stress that could get in the way? And finally, what are your best skills and strategies that you might use to cope with stress or build resilience? So walking through this process can give us, again, a more intentional approach to identifying what it is that we want to be about in the new year and how we can take this as a time to transition into, I suppose, our most well selves as we embark on this next step. So thank you so much to all of you, and thanks for attending and for giving us this opportunity to share with you.
And thank you, Erica and Rosie. I've put a
Sorry, Aaron, I think you're on mute now.
Thank you so much, Erica and Rosie. I've put a survey in the chat. We can continue the question and answers. Just want to give a quick shout out to our Be Well partners, Clint, Kay, Teresa, Kathy, and Bernadette. Thank you so much. And finally, everyone on the call, I'd like to just take one last opportunity to invite all of us to celebrate the wonderful work of Professors Kaiser and Ellingson. Thank you so much for this awesome presentation. We're grateful. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye. Rosie, that was marvelous.
Oh, I feel like, Erica, we just need to put this show on the road. This was a lot of fun to team up with somebody who's outside my wheelhouse in this way.
And the same way also, is there a chance you could put sort of you've given us a real structure for evaluating and addressing. Is there any way you could put this into like the how-to page?
I would be delighted to. So actually, we've started working with the College of Engineering, and Tina, who was on the call earlier, Tina and I put together a curriculum for the faculty to deliver in their classrooms. And they did that last spring semester. It was a really neat pilot. And now we're talking with them about building that out. So long story short, yes, I have those materials. I'm happy to share them, and I use them myself. So take that for what it's worth in terms of endorsement.
That would be really, really great.
And we'd love to highlight those on the Be Well page, where we highlight the two of you, and then, want to learn more or whatever, and then click a button, and then it shows the materials, or however you think would be best to showcase those.
Yeah,
that would be amazing. That's a great idea, Erica, to show that more.
I want Erica's Stonehenge fudge recipe. And I'm going to need a picture, because I
love that.
there was so much I didn't know about that. Yeah.
We are getting great feedback already. So I just have to say, as I was listening to both of you, this went better than I possibly could have imagined.
Oh,
it was amazing. Really,
such
really
a great
amazing
combo of your expertise and passion. So I'm thrilled. Thank you.
I really love this opportunity to sort of jump across disciplines, because we have something to talk about.
We should do this kind of stuff more. I gotta say, it's so fun to get it. I mean, I love my colleagues. Don't get me wrong, Teresa.
No, I know. It's nice to get out every once in a while.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I will send out, we'll wait for a little bit for some feedback to come in, and I'll send that out, but a real deep bow of gratitude to both of you so much.
Oh, well, thank you for that
so much.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. This was fun.
Absolutely.
Great.
Well, happy solstice, everyone.
Happy solstice to you too.
Same to you, Erica.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.